Well, I thought I'd take you along for a drive. We've been talking about snaring a lot. This is really a controversial subject, so that's why we're taking some time to do this and make sure that we're all on the same page. That's all. That's my intention with doing this. So I want to take you to talk to people that I think are in the know. In other words, people that put hundreds and hundreds of snares out and really rely on them. So I traveled down today to talk to Marty Senneker. Marty's been trapping in the trapping community as long as I can remember, as long as I've been in Alberta, and he's somebody I look up to, I've always respected.
So I'm Marty Senneker. I'm the inventor of the Senneker snare system. It's also been referred to as the Alberta Power Snare. I guess my initial prototypes were back in probably 2001. And since that time, we have progressed over the years into 3 separate sizes of springs, each time getting bigger and better. Our initial spring was sized so that a coyote could compress the spring, because our initial snare didn't have a trigger on it. And so once we put the triggers on the spring, we were able to increase the spring poundage. So we went from the original spring, which we call the number 11, we built the number 22 spring, which is known as the Magnum spring. And well, why stop there? It was very apparent that, you know, if we went with a little longer arms, a little bit bigger spring wires, and more spring power, that it was going to do a better job. You know, initially, both times that I upped the spring size, it was actually for the purpose of providing a better unit for wolf snaring. Because I have a much larger animal, a much heavier muscled animal to deal with than a coyote. But I'm a coyote guy, so, you know, of course I would go out and test the things on coyotes as soon as I would develop anything. When I brought the Magnum, I went straight 100% to that. When I brought the 33, the Super Magnum, it was just, again, a night and day difference from going from the Magnum to the Super Magnum, just like it was a night and day difference going from the original Stinger to the Magnum. So we have to define basically what the spring arm on the loop. It's real critical where you clip the trigger on the eyelet. Yeah. Much confusion about that. Now, one side of the eyelet is actually comprised of the spring arm, and that would be referred to in the diagram as the live side of the spring eyelet. The reason it's called the live side is because actually the spring arm, it's a continuation of the spring arm. The other side of the eyelet is called the dead side of the spring eyelet. And the reason it's called the dead side, well, it's not the spring arm. It's the off side of the eyelet. The side that the wire comes to an end on. So we can also call that the wire end side. And when we would clip the trigger onto the wire end side of the spring eyelet, we would have virtually 100% firing rates. Because of the nature of the brush in this country, I would generally tie my snares low, whether I was staking on the ground or tying low to the brush on the ground. And in doing so, that was massively helping our firing rates. As soon as you start tying high, when the animal hits the end of the snare, its front end comes up off the ground, and we're losing some momentum there. And so I rationalized out that if I tie low, all 4 of the animal's feet are on the ground. When it hits the end of that snare, it's just bang, a dead stop, and every ounce of that the animal has generated for power is going into locking the lockup. So as far as breakaway devices go, my personal line of breakaway devices, we refer to them as Senneker Elite. If you look closely on our packaging, we have a bit of a write-up on all our packages of different things, and basically on there I state that the universal breakaway rating is down in the print down there. So a Senneker 265 breakaway device, Senneker number 265 breakaway device, actually opens at 165 pounds on the universal breakaway scale, which is basically the American method, and others have used the same method. Our 385, our number 385 breakaway device opens at 236 pounds on a breakaway reading.
If you could talk to older trappers that haven't actually been around some of the new stuff, or especially our new trappers that are coming up, what would you tell them if they're going to put snares out,
We can have the best tools in the world, but if we don't use it properly, that's going to be a problem. So we could be trapping our whole lives, and if we take the best tool in the world and not use it properly, we're going to be going backwards. We need to learn how to use all this stuff to the best of our abilities, and try not to get stuck into a rut and just say, "Well, this works for me," or let's not bury our heads in the sand. Let's be as up to date on our methods and on using the equipment that we're using today. So, really good idea would be to go and be educated in the best ways to use this modern equipment. And so we have the Alberta Trappers Association for one agency, and that's what we're doing here. Talking about Alberta, they put on a pretty good snare course nowadays that explains how to use modern equipment. Yeah, we want to be the most professional, the most efficient, most effective, and absolutely the most ethical and that we can be, the most humane that we can be, and education will play a very significant role in achieving that.
some of you have heard all kinds of things, and that's the purpose of this video, is to give you some idea where the Alberta Trappers Association's at with it in our education. This is really a controversial subject, so that's why we're taking some time to do this. One of the next parts people I want to introduce you to is Corey Grover. Corey Grover is the inventor of lights out snaring, his system of trigger. He's done a really good job as well. So Corey has put countless hours into coming up with a product that he feels is really good.
I'm just passing through Westlock, brought a shipment of stuff up for the ATA, and real happy with how things are going with the snaring. With the advancement of the products and stuff that we're using, I think we're headed in a more ethical direction, and being able to let our non-target species go. Now, we don't want our capture targets to be released either, so then we get into larger breakaways and which ones to use, and a lot of it gets down to animal weights and power. So then we can start talking about snare lengths. The longer the snare, the more room we give, the more power we give to that animal. It's like walking your dog on a short leash, where when you got them up close, you take the power away from them, but you give them a 12-foot leash and they're running everywhere. We found with shorter cable lengths and the way that the system works, we're achieving that. So with these Magnum springs, like our A1 style spring here, on wolves, the wolves have enough power when they pull that snare closed, and let's say your cam lock slips a bit, the springs only have so much cable that they can pull before they stroke out, but with a wolf, they've got enough power to overcompensate that spring. So now when we get into like coyotes and stuff, coyotes are a different character. The largest coyote doesn't have enough power to recompress the Magnum size spring if your cam lock slips. But the whole idea of us going with our Signature Series spring was to get rid of, to take up that slack, that if we got cam lock slip, that there was still pressure on the backside of those locks. Now with the coyotes, they don't have enough power to re-collapse or recompress that spring to keep that tension. And with the Signature Series spring that we have, it can take up to 4 inches of slack. So when the snare comes closed, and you're pulling up, 4 inches of cable pull off of here. I mean, we've got loops around the coyote's neck that are, you got to be careful when we're skinning. They're tight. Like it's a serious killing device, and the ethics behind it is just how it kills fast. That's the whole point of running these kill springs, is to be able to have the animal expire as fast as possible. So when we talk about the cable pull of a spring, if you can see the difference here between the two, with our A1 Magnum size spring to our Signature Series spring, you can see the difference in how much compensation that the larger spring gives you with the coyotes. Just to give you an example of the spring, so this is a small spring that's on the market, but what ends up happening is when you compress these arms together, your spring arms, the spring takes a set, and what ends up happening with this set is it weakens the spring, and then it will not open back up to the 90 degrees. So basically this spring is useless as far as the effectiveness of it. When you release that trigger, make sure that they're coming back to 90 degrees, because if they're not coming back to 90 degrees, there's problems. One, you've lost the power of that spring, and two, it's not functioning the way we want it to function. So that's the whole idea, like with these springs, is to come back as close to 90 degrees as they can, so that you've got that power. And it's very important, because you don't want this. This is, just because you got a kill spring on there doesn't mean it's doing what the kill spring is designed to do. And the ability to set these with so that they're just set in one position. You bury the trigger in and it's set. So
Okay.
so as this, when this goes to release, what ends up happening is your trigger actually your trigger will actually drop away from your components on your snare, allowing that spring to release. And that's what makes it an effective trigger, or more effective trigger release. They're right around that 26.5 pounds, but the whole idea of that is it doesn't matter which critter's caught, that they've got the ability to release that trigger.
We don't want anything to interfere.
Yeah.
So we owe it to our industry to make sure we're doing the best that we can do. That's my big thing. So,
Yeah.
well, Corey, my whole theme on all of this is to help people to understand how important the ethics is in this. That's my big part of this. So what would you say to trappers, whether they're members or whether they're not members? People that are using snares, what would you say to them?
I can't stress it enough that education on this stuff is important. There's snaring workshops out there with the ATA, which are certified. There's more to snares than just hanging cable, and education is a key component for us to be able to keep this going, and guys knowing what we're doing with the cable and why we're doing it.
We all look out of our own window of what's going on in the world, and we see things, and we try to make sense of what other people are saying based on what we see out our window. And sometimes it doesn't work so good. So we have problems, guys with a registered trap line, they say, well, it's those guys with the resident line, and there's all kinds of people. Everybody's kind of pointing a finger at somebody else. I don't think that's going to take us anywhere. I think there's some things we can do, and we want to make it real clear to both the people of our province and those who don't understand our industry where we're going and why it's so important to us. So let me give you an example of that. I looked after a registered trap line, and I also did resident trapping, and I did wildlife control. That's how I made my living for pretty near 30 years. When I'm trapping on private land and somebody wants me to cut back on the coyote population as an example, I've always tried to make sure I cover all the bases, and I really recommend this. If I go to them, they show me their farm, we discuss what's going on, and the first thing I do once we agree that I'm going to take some coyotes and I'm going to put some cable out is I ask them about their neighbors. I'll give you one example. After I talked to the rancher, I asked him about his neighbors. What do you know about your neighbors? I'm concerned about dogs and things like that. He said, well, the people at 2 miles up, wonderful people, really good. Matter of fact, it wouldn't hurt to talk to them because I know they're having trouble with coyotes too. They've even got some sheep in there. But the guy the other way, he's about a mile and a half. I'll tell you, that guy's a problem. I don't think you wouldn't even want to go in there. So when they told me that this one fella's pretty difficult to deal with, and people say he's half crazy and he's not going to be good to deal with, I wouldn't recommend going there. That's where I go first. Drive into the fella's farm. So I got out, told him what my name was, and I told him I was a trapper. I told him why I was there and that I was going to be trying to bring down some of the coyote numbers, and he said, I don't want nothing to do with this. You start putting snares out, you catch one of my dogs, you'll be dealing with me. I said, sir, I didn't come in here to upset you, but I will be trapping and using lethal neck snares on the land 2 miles from here. I just want you to know. I can see I've upset you, I'll be on my way. So as soon as I drive out of his driveway, I park on the side of the road and I record it. Talked to Happy on November 3rd, and he was mad, didn't even want me on his place. But I've been there, I've told him, and I've done my due diligence. So I guess my message is just simple. There are times where even the person that you're going to be trapping for, or has given you permission, doesn't want the neighbors to know. So you have to make the decision there as a professional. Is it worth it to put snares in there? Or is your option to put in footholds? Hopefully we can talk about that. We can see if we can find some solutions just to make sure that we're doing everything we can to avoid the capture of non-target species. I've been traveling all over trying to get a chance to catch up with Gary Godberson, somebody I look up to. I've always respected his values and ethics in trapping. He takes a considerable amount of animals and we all look up to him. So Gary, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. We've all talked about different aspects of the snaring game, and the relationship that we have and the misunderstandings with people. If you had a chance to talk to trappers, snaremen, what would you say to them, Gary?
What I would say to the snaresmen is we all recognize, this is a great, effective tool, that we can use almost anywhere, but it really has to be done right. It's not a matter of just getting as many snares out as you can in a day. You really have to think about where you're going to set up, what the problem is, what the population is, and do you really understand, the ranchman that you're working for, or the who's in the area, what are the outside forces here. So really look at it globally. Just don't run in there and start getting sets out. Put some real thought to it, and treat this like a business, something that from the start to the end you're doing properly, and it's going to work a lot better for you in the end.
You cover a lot of territory, a lot of residential land. You've developed a pretty good rapport dealing with landowner relations. Could you speak to that for a minute?
Really, with the landowner, it's very important that you're communicating, and just like anything else, we always hear that, with anything in business, communication, and it's so important. And so that's checking in with them at not only the start of the season, to get your permission, but throughout the season, especially if there's a change in what you're doing. Ask them where is a good spot for you to set up. Perhaps where you want to set up, there might be cattle moved into that quarter section in January that you're not aware of. They might be doing it a little different this year. So keep communicating. At the end of the season, let them know how you did. I've made that mistake before too. It's really important to let them know your success or your failures, but how you did. You want to obviously make sure it's good and your name precedes you to that ranch, and you'll be very welcome there. Obviously, if things don't go well, you can shut yourself out of the area pretty quick. So that's the number one things I would stress. Communicate with your landowner, update on your progress and your ultimate success or failures, and how you might do it a little bit differently the next year, and you'll do well on the line.
Okay, I wanted to talk to Hunter Botham today. He does all the manufacturing at the ATA, and so that's a lot of snares. How many years do you think you've been building snares?
Since 2015.
It's a big deal for us here. Quality control has to be there. So Hunter, will you show everybody how you build a snare repetitiously so that you follow a segment and you stay on track so that you're making sure you're building an effective snare?
Yep.
Great.
Okay, so when I am assembling snares, before I put any of the components on, obviously you need to cut your cable. I cut for the coyote snares 4 foot lengths. It's a 1/16 1x19 cable. It is pretty light and it is for coyotes specifically. But the 1x19 configuration is stiffer than the 7x7. So this will hold a nicer loop on your snare itself when you have it set. This is your anchor end. Okay, this is what you're going to tie off with to anchor the snare. This is a heavier cable. It's a 3/32, and it's a 7x7, so it's kind of a softer cable, more malleable than the 1x19. Okay, so once I have my cable cut, I'll start by crimping a 1/16 single stop onto the end of the snare cable. Okay, and I always put 2 on there. And when you're crimping, you want the full power of the ferrule or the single stop. Okay, so you want to make sure you crush the whole ferrule to get the maximum power out of it. Now with the components, when I'm making snares, I just line them up in order, so there's no way that I can mess it up. We start with a washer. Okay, and that may just sound like extra junk you have to put on your snare, but that helps with the kill spring from blowing open your breakaway. Okay, slide that on. The number 2 trigger. Okay, that's obviously what's going to compress and hold the spring closed while it's set, with the small end facing up. Slide that on just like that. Then we have our magnum kill spring. When the animal exerts enough force onto the compressed spring, it'll blow that spring open and tighten it up just that much more. Here's just a little bit of a different configuration on the spring, with the trigger directly attached to the spring itself. Another great product. You don't ever lose the triggers, and it's the lights out kill spring. They're Magnum. Another washer on top of the kill spring. Then we have our cam lock with our number 285 breakaway device. And this cam lock has teeth that are filed into the lock to help bind on the cable. You're going to want the teeth on there just because it's going to grab that cable a little better, and it's not going to relax on the animal. So that's what we run in all of our manufacturing. And what this does is if you catch a non-target like a deer or a moose, it'll open up and then releasing the snare from the animal. And that's what that's designed to do. We slide the breakaway on the cable first, and then the cam lock. So it should look something like that. And then from there we have our collar support. Okay, and that's what's going to hold the snare up on your number 9 wire, and that's what's going to set the snare on the animal's neck. So there is the complete snare put together and how all your components should look. Okay, if any of the components aren't in the proper order, your snare is not going to do what it was intended to do. Okay, and you're going to have a wreck. Okay, so here we got our 4-foot length of 3/32 7x7, and this is what we're going to use to anchor the snare, either to a tree or to the ground with some sort of staking device. So we start off with a 3/32 double ferrule, and then on top of that we put just a number 8 halibut swivel. Okay, this is right in the middle of the snare. Okay, and this is going to help with keeping the cable from kinking. Obviously it's a swivel, so it's going to swivel around so your cable can't get wrapped up and break your cable. Okay, you just go through one eyelet and then loop around back into the ferrule. And then you pull that tight, come over to your swager, and once again you're trying to get the full power of that double ferrule. Okay, just like that. The opposite end here, another double ferrule, and we come back in the side we originally went into the double ferrule. Okay, creating a circle like that. And you make that just big enough to fit your biggest component, which would be the kill spring. Okay, so once you have all of the components onto your 1/16 cable here, we're gonna attach it to a tail end, is what we call it. It's just a piece of 3/32 cable with a number 8 halibut swivel on the end. And they're the beefier size. They make a number 6 as well, but we just kind of made it standard for all of our snares because it can be used on wolves or coyotes. Okay, so now that we got both of our ends done here, we can connect them together. So you're going to need a 1/16 double ferrule that holds the kill end onto the anchor end. Okay, just onto your cable like that, and then through the other eyelet of your swivel. Come back around and back into the 1/16 double ferrule. Once again, you're going to pull that tight and give it a crimp. Okay, so the actual loop of the snare, okay, is right in between the cam on the cam lock and the breakaway device. That little piece of cable in there, you just give that a pinch, okay, and you can kind of roll your snare loop out of there. Okay, so when you set your spring, okay, you're going to need the proper setting tools for that. You open up the spring setters all the way. You put the eyelet of the spring on the center bolt on the setters. Okay, and you compress that, and with the trigger, you're going to want to hook it on the open end of the snare, so where it folds over. Okay.
So Hunter, with making this many snares, you're an instructor, you teach a lot of courses for us, but what would you tell people, say that maybe they challenged the exam years ago, or it's been so many years that they really haven't seen much of the updates when it comes to snaring? What would you tell them?
Through the Alberta Trappers Association, we do have specific workshops dedicated to snaring that are extremely useful and helpful. Doesn't matter your skill level, if you've been doing it for 40 years or you just started. I would recommend taking some of those courses and seeing some of the things that you may be missing out on. If you want to come in for a quick demonstration, or if you're not sure about something, you can always stop by and we can hopefully clear that up for you.
Bill, I've been talking to people about snaring. It's been a controversial issue at times. It's an important part of what we do. And as president, I really wanted to get your take on it. Since we've got trappers that have been trapping for years, but they never took a trapping course. They challenged the exam or whatever. Maybe they haven't upgraded. We've got brand new trappers, and we've also got people that are looking at getting into trapping. If you could leave a message with them on snaring, what would you say?
Talking to trappers and the trapping community here in Alberta, I think what we have to realize is we have a tremendous opportunity here from the perspective of the Alberta Trappers Association. What we would like to see is that trappers are thoughtful and consider not only their regulatory obligations and their legal rights, but take the responsibility beyond that, particularly when they're operating on private land in and around rural communities. And we would hope, and the expectation is that trappers would exercise due diligence in the pursuit of their trapping opportunities on the rural landscape. The Trappers Association is going to do everything that we possibly can in conjunction with the Alberta government in order to deliver education, professional development for trappers so that they can be absolutely as safe as possible when we're using lethal snares in and around rural communities.
Bill, there's some trappers, there's been some discussion on the concern for the future of snaring. We know that there's a few provinces in Canada now that have lost snaring. It comes up. I don't want to focus on that, but as president, I'd like to know your take on that.
There's no doubt that if we fail to meet the challenge as a community, that there will be consequences for trappers in Alberta. We've been given the opportunity to take a leadership role here and rise to that challenge, and the Alberta Trappers Association is going to pursue that with the trapping community to the best of our ability, and I have every reason to believe that we'll be successful doing that.
So when we do get out in the bush, on the edge of the bush, and we're thinking about putting bait in, well, things are going to look quite a bit different here in the winter. But we're looking for some place where we've got ample places to put snares and a safe place where we can haul some bait in. Well, that's where it can get confusing. But that's what I think we should talk about. Maybe look at some different areas and what we're trying to avoid so that we do have success and we don't have to worry so much. But the long and short of it is, when we put bait out, dogs may not be attracted to the bait. They're attracted to the scent that all the other canids are bringing. So we have to come up with a safe place so that we're far enough away that we feel comfortable. We've let the neighbors know that we're going to be trapping and snaring in the areas. We're licensed to trap and we're providing a service to Albertans. Some don't understand that, but we're the ones that are helping with population control. We're doing the most. So if we do our due diligence, do everything we can to make sure that we've done everything to mitigate any chance of catching people's pets or the non-targets, that's the best we can do. That's professional. There's lots of things that I wish I could say, but I think the best thing was to just take it to people that I think are a lot smarter than I am. So you don't have to just take my word for it, and you get a nice rounded view of other people's take on snaring, the importance of doing it right. That's what this whole video is about. I hope you'll take it seriously. You take a look at it. Whether you're going to use the lights out snaring system, Corey Grover, or whether you're going to look at Martin Senneker's system, they're both good systems. So it's up to you to pick which one's going to work the best for you. If you're not familiar with them, take the time, come in and talk to us. Personally, I will help you. Anything that I can do that'll help you to get used to these systems, so that we step up, become the professionals, or continue to be the professionals that we were meant to be. It's really important. Your decision which way you're going to go, but we hope that you're going to do the best you can. I hope this is something that you can use. Thank you very much.